Have you ever seen a shadow linger in the corner of your eye, seen a flashing light dart across the sky? Have you ever wished upon a candle to make your wish come true? I'm sure you've told a haunted tale or two. Are you interested in learning the pagan ways? Witchcraft, grimoires, candles await. Have you ever seen the living dead and stood still instead of fled? Cryptics are fun, but the universe has our eye. The stars align, shows us our signs, and we're here to discuss the divine. Welcome to Moon Brews, a supernatural podcast, hosted by yours truly, Haley.
Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that Down the Crooked Path is researched and recorded in Niagara Falls, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Attawandaron, and the Mississauga of Credit First. This land has been home to Indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and we recognize their enduring connection. We are grateful to share these stories on their lands that carry their histories, and we encourage our listeners to reflect on the past, present, and future of the land they call home. Welcome, wanderers, to Journey Down the Crooked Path, a place where the stories are stranger, the shadows stretch longer, and the things that go bump in the night might just be listening. I'm Amanda Joy, your guide into the eerie, the forgotten, and the downright bizarre. Here, we step off the well-lit roads of Canadian creepies and venture into the murky corners of history, folklore, and the unexplained, where the whispers grow louder and the truth is never quite what it seems. So let's take a deep breath, watch your step, and whatever you do, don't look back. Once you start down the crooked path, you never know what might follow.
History has a way of embedding itself into the floorboards and between the mortar and brick. History tells us stories, and sometimes those are ghost stories. Every city has a building like this, a place where history and hauntings cling to the old building like mildew, and Halifax is no exception. Its shorelines are littered with wreckage, its streets have paved over tragedy, and its architecture is stitched together with grief. Most ghost stories are born from superstitions. They're born from life interrupted, a goodbye never spoken, a body never claimed. And they live in places where the living try to make sense of the dead. Mortuaries, hospitals, schools, tunnels, ships. And one of these places on Argyle Street in Halifax has worn many of these faces. A schoolhouse in 1818, a mortuary, home to bodies when the Titanic sank, a place that witnessed the Halifax explosion, and today it stands as a restaurant, white linens, lobster tails, diners sipping wine. But here the staircases creak when no one's climbing it. Glass shatters without hands, and lights flicker in empty rooms. And to some of its more ethereal visitors, it's still a mortuary, still a school, and those visitors have never left. Five Fishermen Restaurant has seen its fair share of history and tragedy, and like many, our story begins with good intentions. In the early 1800s, Halifax was a colonial town, clawing its way towards permanence. It had mud streaks and harbor for ships. At the time, education was a privilege that far too many were growing up without. So the parishioners of St. Paul's Anglican Church built a modest school out of stone and timber. It became the first national school, and with that, the building stepped into something rare, a promise. Free education regardless of class, and in a time when poverty was inherited and learning was a luxury, children who could have spent their days hauling water or sweeping streets now sat in rows, clutching slates and spelling out futures. The curriculum was steeped in scripture and morality, each lesson a thread meant to stitch character into young minds. They were taught to read, to write, to prayer, to behave. The school became an extension of the pulpit, a place where civic identity was shaped one hymn and one history lesson at a time. Halifax was growing, and this building helped shape its bones. And the school became a statement that the town could be more than just trade and tide, and its children could be more than laborers and sailors. When the school could no longer contain the weight of its own ambition, the building passed to the hands of someone who understood transformation, Anna Leon Owens. She was a widow, a traveler, and governess to the King of Siam. Her plan was to reinvent the school. The Halifax Victorian School of Art was her answer to the city that still clung to its colonial manners. She carved a space for creation and filled the rooms with charcoal and canvases. Soon the building changed again to become the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. Arthur Lismere, one of the group of 7, taught here, his brushstrokes echoing across generations. In the early 1900s, the building changed hands again, and with it, its purpose darkened. The Snow family took possession and turned the space into John Snow and Company Funeral Home. The desks were gone, the art supplies vanished, and in their place came embalming tables, drainage basins, and the machinery of grief. The rooms that once held children and canvases now held bodies. It is with this change that the walls would absorb sorrow like a sponge. The building became a vessel for mourning, and it would soon be asked to hold more than any structure should. 2 catastrophes were coming. In April of 1912, the Atlantic gave back what it had taken. The RMS Titanic sank beneath black waters and cold stars, and Halifax became a city of the aftermath, the final port for bodies that would never return home. Cable ships hauled them in from the wreckage site, frozen, bloated, dressed in evening wear and life belts, and brought them to shore like cargo. The John Snow and Company Funeral Home, once a schoolhouse and later an art academy, was now the place where grief was sorted, tagged, and embalmed. The wealthy, of course, were prioritized. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world at the time, was processed here, his body cataloged meticulously while the city held its breath. The building was not designed for mass death, but it adapted. The air grew heavy with formaldehyde and salt. Staff worked in silence, surrounded by the drowned, their faces pale and distorted, their names whispered like confessions. Outside, families waited for news, for confirmation, for closure. Inside, the dead waited for burial. Then, on the morning of December 6, 1917, Halifax was torn apart. A collision in the harbor between SS Mont Blanc and the SS Imo triggered the largest man-made explosion before the atomic age. The blast flattened neighborhoods, shattered windows miles away, and killed over 2,000 people in seconds. Limbs were found on rooftops. Children vanished mid-play. The city became a wound, raw and exposed, and the dead came faster than anyone could count. John Snow and Company Funeral Home became the epicenter of the aftermath. 30 to 40 bodies a day passed through its doors. Some were burned beyond recognition. Others arrived with missing limbs, faces shattered, names unknown. Coffins lined the streets outside, stacked like barricades against the chaos. Inside, the staff worked without pause, embalming, documenting, preparing, the rooms filled with the smell of chemicals and scorched fabric. The building had become a container for the catastrophe, a structure that held the weight of mass death without collapsing. And long after the bodies were buried and the streets were swept clean, something remained. In 1975, in a city modernized, expanded, and a place that reframed its relationship with the past, the building on Argyle Street opened its doors once more, this time as Five Fishermen Restaurant. The place had been transformed into one of Halifax's most celebrated dining establishments. Tables set where coffins once stood, wine poured where formaldehyde was once kept. The menu leans into a maritime identity of the city, offering dishes that echo the harbor just blocks away. For those who prefer land to sea, there's also aged steaks. The dining room is elegant with exposed bricks and soft lighting, but the atmosphere carries something older. The patrons come expecting dinner, but leave wondering what else was seated at their table. One employee found out the hard way that staying late is something you shouldn't do alone. It was supposed to be a quiet shift. The restaurant had emptied out, the last table cleared, and the lights dimmed to their end-of-night glow. A young dishwasher new to the job and unfamiliar with the building's reputation was left alone in the kitchen, scrubbing pots and stacking plates. The steam hung thick in the air, curling around the industrial sinks and stainless steel counters, and that's when he saw it. A figure, pale and indistinct, that looked like a man, only not quite. Drifting through the haze, not walking, there were no footsteps. It was just slow, deliberate movement through the kitchen, passing behind the prep station and through the dish pit before vanishing into the walk-in cooler without ever opening the door. The dishwasher was freaked out by what he encountered, and he didn't wait to ask questions. He dropped the sponge, bolted through the back door, and never returned, just gone. The story made its way through the staff quickly, and it serves as a little reminder to a rule they had between themselves, exchanged with nervous laughter. You can stay late, they say, but never alone. Another frequently seen apparition is that of a man in a pea coat. He appears as a full-body apparition, solid, dressed in a long pea coat that doesn't match the season or the century. A longtime servant named Kirsten was one of the first to speak openly about him. She saw him standing at the stairwell, and at first, she thought he was a guest, until he vanished before her eyes. Others have seen him as well, always in the same coat, and always by the stairwell, sometimes near the kitchen, and he never says anything. His spirit is always quiet. He's just standing still and watching. Most people agree that he is the ghost of Jon Snow himself, the man who ran the funeral home when the building was a morgue. Staff believe that he is still doing what he always did, watching over the building, maintaining order, and ensuring that the dead are respected. His ghost is believed to be a residual presence, not a conscious spirit, but more deeply embedded echo of duty and emotional imprinting. Some suggest that his spirit is a hybrid between a ghost created from the residual trauma of the events the stonework witnessed and an intelligent haunting with an awareness of purpose, choosing to stay behind due to a sense of responsibility.
Once upon a time, in the land of everyday moments, there lived a sprinkle of magic called icing sugar photography. From sticky cake smash smiles to wind-swept yes moments, they capture the sugar sweet, the beautifully messy, and everything in between. Whether you're a blushing bride or a blooming family, or just want to freeze time for a second, icing sugar photography is your fairy god lens. Visit icingsugarphotography.com and follow along on Instagram at icingsugarphoto. Let your story sparkle, because life is sweet and memories should be too. You, still haunting the same old fast fashion? Time to dig up something better with Back from the Dead Goods, a Canadian small business where forgotten threads get a second life and sustainability meets spooky. This isn't just upcycled clothing, it's resurrected fashion with an eerie edge. Handpicked, reworked, and revived, every piece is as unique as a ghost story whispered at midnight. And because you're a part of the Canadian Creepies family, you get an exclusive deal. Use code Canadian Creepies at checkout for 10% off. Find them lurking on Instagram, Etsy, and Poshmark. Links are in the episode description. Give your wardrobe a second chance at life, if you dare. Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you. All right, creeps, real quick. If you've got a Canadian business or project that you want to reach our spooky little corner of the podcast world, we've got ad space available on Canadian Creepies. And hey, if you're an artist, activist, podcast host, musician, writer, content creator, actor, or just someone with a strange or chilling story to tell, we'd love to hear from you too. We're always open to collaborations with folks who vibe with our creepy, curious little corner of Canada. Email us at CanadianCreepiespodcast@gmail.com and let's get weird together.
In 2014, drawn by decades of whispered stories and unexplained phenomenon, the paranormal investigators of Nova Scotia conducted a sweep of the Five Fishermen restaurant. During the session, the investigators claimed to have contacted a spirit who identified himself as Drake through EVP. That alone is unusual, but what followed next was even more fascinating. The team cross-referenced the name with historical records tied to the building's time as John Snow and Company Funeral Home. They discovered that a man named Drake had indeed been processed there, his body prepared in the very space where the restaurant now stands. Most likely, he was one of the many victims of the Titanic disaster or the Halifax explosion, but for the most part, who he was in life is largely unknown. Descriptions of Drake's ghost are sparse. The investigators and staff have claimed that his presence feels subdued and non-threatening. He doesn't appear in dramatic fashion with flickering lights or sudden gusts of cold. He is really more felt rather than seen, but when he does manifest visually, he is said to be a man in his 30s or 40s with indistinct features and clothing that doesn't match the current style. He is often described as wearing a dark shirt or coat. Sometimes, drifting in from the stairwell, a soft sobbing can be heard, barely louder than the hum of the walk-in cooler. It's not a wailing or a scream, just a soft, unmistakable sound of grief. Staff have paused mid-shift thinking that someone is still in the building, and when they check the stairs, the hallway, the restrooms, no one is found. Following the sound is a sharp and sudden drop in temperature, almost as if the air itself is mourning. They call her the Weeping Woman. Theory suggests that she's tied to the Halifax explosion, perhaps a mother or a wife who lost everything in a single instant. She has no name tied to her. Her identity is a mystery. And when she is around, staff describe a heaviness in the air, like an emotional weight. Unlike other spirits in the building, she isn't tied to any duty or routine. Rather, she is reliving a loss. She's more of an emotional loop haunting, grieving her lost loved ones, even in death. Similar to the Weeping Woman, the child in the hall is a ghost who is heard and felt more so than seen. Fleeting laughter, light, and playful, followed by the unmistakable patter of small feet running across the upper floor. The staff hears it in the quiet hours, often after closing, when the building settles and the ambient noise fades. No child is ever seen, nor has anyone caught a glimpse of a figure, but the sound is heard often. Theories surround the building's earliest history, serving as a school in the 1800s. The hallways would have been filled with children who climbed the stairs and played in the corners, now occupied by wine racks and linen closets. Some believe the laughter is a residual echo, a loop of joy that has been preserved in the architecture. The joyful sound is a stark contrast to the grief and trauma that followed the school's history. Seen by both guests and staff is the door watcher. He doesn't move. He just stands, always near the entrance of the private dining room, a space that once housed the morgue. Guests have glimpsed him in passing, a shadowy figure, tall and still, just outside their peripheral vision. When they turn and look back, he's gone. There are some who believe that he was a former embalmer, lingering near the threshold where death once passed. Others think that he's intelligent, aware, choosing when and to whom he appears. But no one has ever seen his face, and no one has ever heard his voice. He's a silhouette. He simply is the one who guards the door. But the Five Fishermen restaurant isn't just home to individual spirits. It's a nexus of ghostly phenomenon that seems woven into the building's very structure. One of the most common experiences reported by staff and guests is sudden drops in temperature. It's not a gradual cooling, but a sharp, localized chill, like stepping into a walk-in freezer without warning. These cold spots tend to appear near the stairwell and the private dining room. Both areas are historically tied to the building's time as a morgue. The air becomes still and heavy and unmistakably different, as if something unseen has entered the room. Lights flicker without cause, especially near the entrance to the former morgue. Electricians have inspected the wiring, but no faults have ever been found. Appliances sometimes power on or off without human interaction. Dishwashers, coolers, even light switches seem to respond to something beyond physical touch. These moments aren't violent or chaotic, but they are common enough to unsettle even seasoned staff. Doors creak open on their own, slowly and deliberately, as if someone is passing through. There's no wind, no draft, no mechanical fault. Occasionally, glassware will crack or shatter without warning. A wine glass on a shelf untouched will split cleanly or shatter to the ground. Perhaps the most unnerving phenomenon is the feeling of being watched. Guests and staff alike report a sudden awareness, an invisible gaze, a presence just behind them. They turn expecting someone to be there, but the space is empty. Some describe brief disorientation, a momentary sense of vertigo or confusion, as if the building itself shifts beneath them. These aren't isolated events. They form a tapestry of hauntings, phenomena that don't demand attention, but rather these refuse to be ignored. The Five Fishermen doesn't house ghosts. It behaves like one. It isn't just a restaurant. It's a layered echo chamber of Halifax's past. Beneath the clink of cutlery and the hum of conversation, something older stirs. A child's laughter, a woman's grief. Some spirits linger out of duty, others sorrow, and a few, like Drake, simply want to be known. Through flickering lights, cold stairwells, and doors that open without touch, it's not haunted in the theatrical sense. It's haunted in the way that grief is haunting, in the way that memory clings to a place that held it too long. Who knows what this building will become next, whether it becomes a gallery, a boutique, or something entirely unexpected. It will take its ghosts with it. Buildings like this don't retire. They evolve, and they carry their stories forward, stitched into the beams and the floorboards, waiting for someone to listen. So, if you dine there, listen. Not just to the servers or to the stories printed on the menu. Listen to the hush between courses, to the creak of old floorboards beneath polished shoes, to the subtle shift in the air when no one's near. You might feel that weight of memory pressing in from the walls, because at Five Fishermen restaurant, the past doesn't fade. It's seated at the table and it's waiting for the next course.